All right, so here's the deal. I don't have time to do like a write up or anything. I was just on the Twitters and got into a discussion about why warlocks suck. And yeah, I'm gonna do a special article this week about that. Special Ask Angry, why did I say that warlocks suck? And because I hurt the feelings of a class, and God knows we have to address that now. But so two people. One of the people who was involved in this is Twitter user Beardy Noise, and in the end, Beardy Noise came out and said because I really like warlocks, and I don't. They suck. I'm sorry. From a roleplay and interaction perspective and story perspective, they suck. It's not mechanical per se. But anyway, I didn't clarify that. But Beardy Noise, like, because, I really hate that, once you cast a spell, you're done, and warlocks get around that. And, after talking to him, I realized, oh, he plays 3rd edition in Pathfinder. And so, he doesn't understand that, nowadays, Vancian magic is not the limitation it used to be. He's like, I really like the idea of having Eldritch Blast as a basic attack instead of, as a spell where you have to decide, do I cast my spell or just suck for the round? And, okay, fine. No, I totally get that. I get all the arguments against Vancian magic, and that's totally fine. But then I turned around and said, well, that mechanic is not, because I didn't realize the whole 3rd edition Pathfinder thing. I said, that mechanic is not limited to warlocks, because wizards, they get like Ray of Frost or Firebolt or whatever the fuck it is. They get that as a cantrip, and they can cast that all the times they want. Clerics get, Sacred Flame or whatever. Basically every class has cantrips, and they're well advised to take at least one attack cantrip to work as a basic attack, at least spellcasting classes, your primary spellcasting classes. Well, then someone else jumped in, Snarky, what is his name? Snarkosa, on Twitter, jumped in and said, well, technically, not all spellcasting classes, hashtag not all spellcasters, because the paladin and the ranger don't have cantrips. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but they don't. You don't get it. Except, because I'm looking at that and I'm like, okay, does this person really need an explanation here as to why the difference? Or is this one of those snarky, well, actually kind of a thing that, well, I agree with you, but actually, if you want to be technically accurate, not all spellcasters have cantrips, and then I go in and do an explanation as to the whole basic attack thing in D&D 5th edition, and then they turn around and say, well, I'm not arguing that. What I was saying is that actually spellcasters don't all have cantrips, so I'm technically right, even though your explanation is also correct. Now I'm going off to troll Reddit. Yeah, so I had to make sure that wasn't the case. And Snarky, how do I forget names so quickly? Snarkosa immediately said, no, this isn't a trolling thing. I legitimately wanted to understand the context of this. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's talk about it, because there is actually a really clever and subtle sort of damage mechanic built into D&D 5th edition, which is why some spellcasters have cantrips and some spellcasters don't. So, it's worth me taking a few minutes, just sit here and explain it for anybody who wants to care. So here's the deal. 5th edition was built on this idea of, I keep touching my face, I'm sorry. 5th edition was built on this idea of a thing called bounded accuracy. The idea is that the creators didn't want the bonuses on your D20 rolls, that is your ability checks, your skill checks, ability checks, saving throws, and attack rolls especially, to go completely batshit insane, so that you have like a plus 30 to attack and yada yada yada. Why didn't they want to do this? Well, there's actually 2 good reasons for it. Number one, if the numbers on bonuses get too big, oh god, everything's falling apart here. Yeah, this is a great production, huh? If the numbers on everything get too big, then all the difficulty numbers have to balloon out of control also. So that at higher levels you have to have DCs like a DC 30 climb check or whatever. And that gets really ridiculous really fast, especially when you consider that for the most part, climbing a cliff shouldn't keep getting more difficult throughout the game. You know, it puts the DM in the position of having to create excuses for enhanced difficulty throughout the game. It's like, well, you know, you want to pick a lock, but you're 15th level, so this is a mithril super lock now. And, you know, it's just kind of a pain in the ass. A lock is a lock is a lock for the most part. I mean, I understand there's different grades of lock, but it requires the DM to constantly keep recentering what is considered to be an average difficulty. So at first level, an average difficulty might be 10, but then at 5th level, it might be 15, and at 20th level, it might, or 10th level, whatever numbers I was saying, it might be 20, and then 25, and then 30. So that average difficulty keeps creeping up on absolutely every task, including the armor class of monsters. Which also means that armor class ends up on this treadmill, where the armor class for stuff has to keep getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and the save DCs on spells and abilities have to keep getting higher and higher and higher. So then you have to have this treadmill for wizards, where the saving throw against their higher level spells is higher than the saving throw against their lower level spells, and so it all puts all those numbers on a treadmill. That's a pain in the ass. The second reason for bounded accuracy is because as soon as you allow that big range of different numbers, between, and someone could have anywhere between a +0 to a +50, once you allow that, the difference between someone who is bad at something and something who is good at something becomes ridiculous, okay? It's, if you have, if you're at 15th level now, and so the average difficulty on something is 25 because the average 15th level character has like a +10 or a +15 or whatever, then you have a character who's not great at something. Maybe all he's got is his ability modifier, which, +3, +4 if it's a good ability score. There is a huge difference in the chance of a non-expert doing something and the chance of an expert doing something. And you might say, well, that makes perfect sense. An expert should be much better at doing something than a non-expert. And the more training you have at something, yeah, that's all well and good. But what it means is that every character has to have become a specialist, an expert in whatever tasks the party wants to perform at high levels. And if you don't have an expert in that particular task, those tasks then are just impossible. Okay? Like, if take, for example, breaking down a door. That's a simple one, right? No, that's not a good one because that's not really scaled for expertise. Well, take picking a lock. Okay, take opening a lock. If if the difficulty for picking a lock goes up to, 25, 30, whatever at higher levels, then somebody who is not an expert at picking a lock really has no chance at ever picking a lock at those levels. The problem is, what if the party doesn't have a rogue? Do they just never get through a locked door? And you say, well, you can get around the locked door other ways. That's why I know it's not a perfect example. But, well, actually, by the same token, if the locked door has a difficulty of 25 to pick, well, it also should have a pretty high difficulty to break down. Otherwise, nobody would ever try to pick the lock anyway. It's just a matter of, we'll just break down the door or whatever. So they wanted to kind of tighten up the difference between an expert and a non-expert. Oh, you know what? The biggest problem that started to show up in was your social interaction roles. Okay? Like, if now it's 15th level and the DC to intimidate the king into doing what you want is DC 25, nobody except the trained intimidator can participate in that interaction at all, and nobody else has a chance of success. So you got to keep those numbers kind of tight so that the difference between an expert and a non-expert is smaller. Okay? Bounded accuracy. Well, now, once you introduce bounded accuracy to the game, you have another problem. That is, well, how do you express the difference between a level 1 and a level 10 character? Or a level 1 and a level 10 monster? So the designers of the game decided, and this is something that actually kind of started in 4th edition, but they decided to differentiate levels by the amount of damage and the amount of hit points. After all, hit points go up every level anyway. But the thing is, if you looked back at D&D in previous editions, damage increased steadily throughout the game by level if you were a spellcaster, but it increased at a much lower rate if you were a martial character, a fighter, or a ranger with a bow, or a rogue, or whatever, or a monk. You didn't have as many options to increase your damage to quite the same degree that spellcasters could. And the spellcasters could only increase their damage with their limited spells. That I only have 3 fifth level spell slots, so I can only do 3 high damage spells, a day. So they figured, okay, the solution is we're gonna have damage go up as you level up, and now that created a problem too, because damage for martial classes is based on weapons, and you don't want weapons to you don't want to put the characters on a treadmill of constantly increasing their equipment. Now, there's actually a faulty premise in there, but I'm not going to address that now. Someday I'll talk about magic items and stuff, because that's actually kind of a fucked up premise, and that's part of the whole money problem in D&D. But we're going to put that aside, okay? A sword is a sword is a sword. It's always going to do 1d8 damage plus your strength modifier, or 1d10 if you're using it two-handed. And if it's a magical weapon, it might do up to plus 3 additional damage. Done and done and done and done. Okay? So, at the same time, you also don't want your spellcasters reliant only on their spell slots to crank up their damage. Their damage has to consistently increase. So, every class has built into it a basic attack assumption. Something they can do round after round after round after round. And on top of that, every basic attack has a built-in increase in damage every couple of levels. Actually, specifically, it's 5th level, 11th level, and 17th level, I think, off the top of my head. Okay, so how do we see this? So for spellcasters, it's easy. Your wizards, your clerics, warlocks, they have cantrips, right? And if you look at the cantrips, I'm just flipping through here, and we're gonna go to let's do Sacred Flame. That's a cleric cantrip, right? So the cleric's cantrip is Sacred Flame. They can throw that as many times per day as they want, and the target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 1d8 radiant damage. Does not gain advantage from cover on that, but that's neither here nor there. Now at 5th level, the damage increases to 2d8, and at 11th level, the damage increases to 3d8, and at 17th level, the damage increases to 4d8. So you see now the cleric has a basic attack that periodically through the game increases its damage. Basically, you add on another die roll. So it's 1d8, 2d8, 3d8, 4d8. And you see this pattern a lot, because if you then look at, not Scorching Ray, that's a spell. If you then look at Ray of Frost, or Eldritch, let's find Ray of Frost here. If we look at Ray of Frost, we're going to see a very similar pattern. Ray is R, Ray of Frost. Ray of Frost, 1d8 cold damage and speed reduced, ups to 2d8, 3d8, 4d8 at 5th, 11th, and 17th. And if you look at Eldritch Blast has a higher basic damage to begin with, but it still follows that same pattern. So it's 1d10 force damage. Oh, and then what happens is you can actually shoot two shots of Eldritch Blast at 5th level, 3 shots at 11th level, and 4 shots at 17th level. But you can see again now it's still doing that, double damage, triple damage, quadruple damage at those level markers. So that covers the spellcasters, and that's why anybody whose basic attack is assumed to be a spell is they have cantrips, okay? Now you can say, well, a cleric has a basic attack because they could swing a big old mace or a warhammer or whatever their god's primary weapon is. Yeah, they can, but the damage doesn't scale up at 5th, 11th, and 17th level. It stays where it is. So what about the paladin? The paladin doesn't get cantrips. He doesn't get that basic attack that sweeps up level after level after level. What does the paladin actually get? Well, if you flip to the paladin, you'll notice that if I can find the damn paladin, at 5th level, extra attack. The paladin can make 2 attacks a round, which is just making a weapon attack twice. Huh, what happens at 11th level? Oh, 11th level actually improves their divine smite. And 17th, that's actually looking at the paladin, they are a little bit off. But the thing that the paladin gets is this divine smite, where they can actually fuel with their spell slots, doing extra damage, um, and extra attack. Yeah, that is actually. Oh, and improved divine smite. So they kind of balance it between the two. Now I realize that that means that the paladin is actually spending some of his limited ability, some of his limited spellcasting ability to increase his damage, but it's sort of two things that kind of wobble back and forth and keep things sort of in check. So he does get that extra attack, but he also gets the whatchamacallit, the smite, and they also get a couple of different abilities, like the once you choose your paladin oath, you can enhance your attack in other ways. All of these various things together add up to increasing the paladin's damage output at kind of that same rate. Because if you look at the fighter, well, the fighter actually is fairly straightforward at 5th, 11th, and 20th level. Not 17th, huh? Oh, because he's got the action surge. Okay. So, again, at 5th and 11th level, the fighter gets to make an extra attack, and at 20th level, the fighter gets a third extra attack, so that's the 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times damage. But in addition, the fighter also has a feature that allows him to take extra actions on his turn, which is, again, a more limited ability. But it's also a little bit more versatile because it can be any sort of extra action. You combine that with some of the other features that fighters get, and again, you see that their damage is kind of increasing at that same rate. The ranger gets an extra attack at 5th level, and then they don't really get extra attacks that continue. Instead, what they get are features from their archetype, which, for the Hunter Ranger at 11th level, gains the ability to make multiple attacks either through volley or whirlwind attack, which, steps in for that 11th level 3 times the damage thing. And the Beastmaster gets a companion that can, make additional attacks, yada, yada, yada. And then eventually, okay. So, yeah, starting at 11th level, the Beastmaster Ranger's companion can make 2 attacks when you command it to attack. So, between all of that, again, and a few other extra abilities, the Ranger is getting that double, triple, quadruple damage. So, ultimately, the classes that have cantrips specifically so that they can have a basic attack whose damage is keyed to level, not spell slot level. And that's an important point too, because most of the spells, most of the non-cantrip spells, their output changes based on the spell slot that you spend on them. Whereas cantrips, it changes on the class level, which guarantees, again, that without expending any resources, you're on this double, triple, quadruple damage scale, just like the other classes are. And if you really look closely at every class, I mean, there's a lot of wobble in there, because things are balanced against other things to kind of figure out, well, there's going to be 6 combats in a day approximately, so we give everyone enough resources to make sure that they're doing double, triple, quadruple damage over 6 combats, and then you can trade off, instead of guaranteeing triple attack at 11th level, you can maybe do double attack at 11th level and then balance it against some ability that someone can crank out often enough that it gives them that same sort of damage output. It's not a perfect pattern, obviously, or else all the classes would be identical, which is, and that's kind of what 4th edition tried to do. Like, if you look really carefully, by the way, at the powers in 4th edition, particularly the at-will powers, you'll notice that same built-in feature that at certain levels, the damage output on the stuff you can do every round without fail increases along this sort of specific damage curve. And that's because 4th edition tried to do both. They tried to do both a treadmill and a... Did they? Yeah, not so much a treadmill, because there weren't basic attacks or anything. So yeah, 4th edition was already kind of... No, because... I don't know, I'd have to look back at it. It's been a long time since I looked at 4th edition. But basically, 5th edition has moved the expression of levels and power from attack and accuracy to damage. And thus cantrips that do multiple damage, thus extra attacks, and so on, and so on, and so on. So I hope that kind of answers the question. I'm sorry I didn't do like a write-up on this, but it would have taken too much time, and I'm pretty sure I just recorded like a 20-minute video, but there you go. So anyway, angry out, I got shit to do. Talk to you all some other time.